Before we can talk about triumph, about overcoming, about turning life's greatest obstacles into fuel for greatness, we must first go to the source of it all, the mind, because everything, every action, every decision, every success, every failure begins in the mind, and not merely in its surface thoughts, but in the deeply ingrained patterns of belief that shape the world we think we see. You see, we do not perceive the world as it is, we perceive the world as we are. The mind does not passively receive reality, it interprets it, colors it, even distorts it according to what we believe. This is not philosophy alone, it is supported by psychology, neuroscience, and 1,000 years of human experience. The mind is the master power that molds, and man is mind. And evermore, he takes the tool of thought and shapes what he wills. Now let's go deeper. We must understand that the mind is not fixed. It is fluid, plastic, capable of change at any stage of life. Modern neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reorganize itself, to form new connections, to adapt and evolve. What does this mean for you? It means you are not bound by the past. You are not trapped by what happened to you, what you were told, or what you used to believe. The mind you woke up with this morning is not the same mind you must go to bed with tonight. But here is the caveat, and it is an important one. The mind is powerful, yes, but it is also programmable. And if you do not consciously program it, then it will be programmed for you by media, by society, by fear, by habit, by the voices of people who may not want to see you rise. This is why so many people with immense potential live far beneath their capabilities. They are slaves not to their circumstances, but to their unconscious thought pattern. They've allowed external forces to write the script of their lives, and then they wonder why the story feels foreign. It all begins with awareness. To develop mental power, we must become observers of the mind itself, noticing what we think, questioning why we think it, rewriting the beliefs that do not serve us. Napoleon Hill once said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But note, conceiving and believing are acts of mental discipline. They are not passive hopes. They are deliberate, repeated acts of imagination and conviction. Mental power, therefore, is not wishful thinking. It is not closing your eyes and hoping the storm passes. It is standing in the middle of the storm, fully awake, fully aware, and choosing to steer your thoughts rather than let them steer you. It is developing a mind that can hold vision in the midst of chaos, that can maintain composure under pressure, that can see possibility where others see impossibility. Let me ask you, how often do you monitor the quality of your thoughts? How often do you take command of your internal state the same way a pilot takes control of a plane during turbulence? Most people react, but mental power is about choosing. Choosing your state, choosing your meaning, choosing your next move with intention, not emotion. And this power does not require you to be born into privilege or genius. It requires you only to become aware, to become intentional, and to become disciplined in thought. Discipline is the bridge between potential and power. It is not enough to know that your mind is powerful. You must train it like a muscle. You must feed it with high-quality input, guard it from destructive influences, and push it beyond its comfort zone. As you begin to develop this power, you will notice something remarkable. The world changes, but not because the world has changed, because you have. The same situation that once paralyzed you now provokes action. The same insult that once wounded you now teaches resilience. The same problem that once seemed impossible now looks like an invitation to rise. And this is not magic, it is mental mastery. So, when I say that everything begins in the mind, I mean it literally. Your relationships, your finances, your health, your creativity, your courage, it all flows from the thoughts you repeatedly entertain. You are the sculptor, and your thoughts are the chisel, and the life you shape is the result of what you believe is possible. Now, I want to leave you with a thought, not to impress you, but to impress something upon you. If you do not take hold of your mind, something else will. But if you do, if you learn to direct your thoughts with clarity, with purpose, with intensity, then there is nothing, truly nothing, that you cannot overcome. And that is the first victory, to become the master of your own mind. Now that we've explored the foundational truth that the mind is the master, we must move to the next step in our journey, discipline. Because it's not enough to simply understand that the mind is powerful. Power without direction is chaos. Fire without control burns down the house. But when directed, when focused, power becomes purpose, and it is through mental discipline that we learn to direct that power toward meaningful, victorious ends. Let's be honest, life does not come without hardship. No one gets a pass. Pain visits the rich and the poor, the privileged and the overlooked, the dreamer and the skeptic alike. The difference then is not what happens to us, but what we do with what happens. And here lies one of the greatest transformations available to any human being, the shift from victimhood to victory, from reaction to responsibility, from being at the mercy of events to becoming the author of meaning. But this shift is not automatic. It is a choice, a trained response, a discipline of the mind. You see, the victim mindset is seductive. It asks nothing of you but surrender. It offers sympathy instead of solutions. It trades the burden of effort for the comfort of excuses. But what it never delivers, what it cannot deliver, is growth or progress or power. The victor, on the other hand, may be wounded, but he chooses to rise. She may feel fear, but she acts in spite of it. The victor does not deny pain, but refuses to be defined by it. Mental discipline is the bridge between those two identities. It is the decision, sometimes made in the darkest hour, that says, I will not let this moment break me. I will use it. I will learn from it. I will become something because of it. This is not delusion. It is strength. It is philosophy lived out in action. The Stoics called this the highest form of wisdom, to control what one can and surrender what one cannot. They trained their minds not to be free of hardship, but to be superior to it. Let me give you a concrete example. Every person I have ever studied who achieved something truly extraordinary had one thing in common. They faced adversity, not minor inconvenience, but real suffering. And yet, they used that adversity like fuel. Nelson Mandela endured 27 years in prison, not with bitterness, but with focus. He emerged not broken, but built. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist imprisoned in Nazi death camps, lost everything: family, freedom, dignity. But he said this: everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That is mental discipline. That is victory. So, how do we begin to harness it ourselves? It begins with one very difficult but empowering truth. You are responsible for your mind. Not your parents, not your past, not society, not your trauma. All of those things may have influenced you, yes. They left fingerprints on your psyche, but now, as an adult, you are the gatekeeper. You decide whether to remain a prisoner of old programming or to rise as the architect of your own thinking. Responsibility, then, is not a burden, it is liberation. When you say, I choose to think differently, you take your power back. And the moment you do that, truly do it, you begin to transcend. The anger softens, the blame fades, and what emerges is focus, clarity, and strength. Mental discipline is not about denying emotion, it is about mastering response. Let's not romanticize it. It takes work. It requires consistency. Training the mind is no different from training the body. You don't go to the gym once and expect transformation. No, you show up daily. You challenge yourself. You push through fatigue. The same is true here. You begin by watching your thoughts. You question the stories you tell yourself. You replace automatic reactions with deliberate choices. And over time, like a sculptor chiseling away the unnecessary, you shape a mind capable of victory. And something interesting happens as you do this. The world begins to respond. You stop attracting drama because you stop feeding it. You stop fearing failure because you've redefined it. You stop waiting for someone to save you because you've already claimed the role. You move from powerless to purposeful now. If there is one enemy more dangerous than failure, more persistent than hardship, and more corrosive than any obstacle outside of us, it is the voice of doubt within us, the whisper that says, "You're not ready," the murmur that questions, "Who do you think you are?" That subtle but constant presence that creeps in just as we begin to move forward. It wears many masks: fear, hesitation, perfectionism. But at its core, it is doubt. And if we do not learn to master it, it will master us. The greatest battle we will ever fight is not in the boardroom or the arena or the courtroom. It is within the confines of our own mind. The battlefield is silent. The weapons are invisible, but the consequences are very real. You can have talent, intelligence, and opportunity, but if doubt wins, none of it will matter. Because doubt does not need to stop you with force, it only needs to make you hesitate, and hesitation over time becomes paralysis. We've all felt it. That moment just before we take a leap, make a decision, step into the unknown. That moment when the heart says go, but the mind offers a list of reasons to wait. The truth is, doubt is not always loud. It often arrives as reason, as logic, even as prudence. But let me say this plainly. Logic is only as powerful as the assumptions that feed it. And most doubt is built on faulty assumptions. Assumptions we never bothered to challenge. Where do those assumptions come from? They come from old experiences, from the words of others, from failures we never properly processed, and most dangerously, they come from comparison. We look outward at what others had done, at what they have achieved, and we shrink. We convince ourselves that their strength somehow diminishes ours, when in fact the opposite is true. The success of others should be proof, not poison. It should remind us that greatness is not a lottery, it is a discipline. But again, doubt doesn't care about logic, it's emotional. It speaks to our deepest fears, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of inadequacy. And because it speaks from within, we tend to believe it. We assume that if the voice is internal, it must be authentic. But that is not the case. Not all inner voices are wise. Some are simply echoes, echoes of old fears, old failures, old programming. So what do we do with doubt? We don't ignore it. We confront it. We question it. We learn to treat our thoughts the way a good scientist treats a theory, with healthy skepticism. When the mind says, "You're not good enough," we must ask, according to whom? Based on what? We shine the light of reason on it, and we watch it shrink. Because doubt thrives in the dark, it thrives in silence. But when we speak to it, when we expose it, it begins to lose its grip. And here's the paradox. Courage does not mean the absence of doubt. It means acting despite it. Every courageous act you've ever witnessed, every story of greatness you admire, was performed by someone who felt fear, heard doubt, but moved anyway. The mind said, "You might fail," and they replied, "Yes, and I might also grow." To win the inner battle, you must begin to rewire your internal dialogue. You must replace default thoughts with deliberate ones. This is not positive thinking for its own sake. This is strategic mental conditioning. You are programming the instrument through which you experience life. And if you let it run on yesterday's script, you will keep reliving yesterday's limitations. This is why rituals matter. Morning affirmations, meditation, journaling, visualization. These are not cliches. They are disciplines. They are tools to reframe the narrative. Because here's the truth. Your brain is always listening. If you feed it fear, it will search for more fear. If you feed it power, it will begin to look for opportunities. The mind is like a compass. It points wherever it is most often directed. One of the greatest things you can do for your mental power is to become the author of your own inner language. Stop borrowing beliefs. Stop reciting doubts given to you by people who gave up on their own dreams. Choose your words carefully, especially the ones you speak to yourself. Because when you change your language, you change your identity. You no longer say, "I can't," but "I'm learning." You don't say, "This is too hard," but "This is training." You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I succeed beyond anything I've imagined?" And suddenly the voice of doubt begins to quiet, not because it has vanished, but because you've grown louder. You've chosen a stronger voice. You've given more weight to the belief in your potential than to the fear of your past. So I'll leave you with this. The mind will speak many things, but only you decide which voice becomes your truth. If you want to rise, if you want to overcome, you must choose belief over doubt, discipline over fear, and vision over hesitation. The greatest victory is not proving the world wrong. It is proving to yourself that the voice of doubt was never stronger than your will to rise. As we continue building this foundation of mental power, we must now turn to one of its most vital elements, focus. Because while belief gives us energy and discipline gives us structure, it is focus that gives us direction. Without direction, power is scattered. The greatest minds in history, the greatest builders, leaders, and creators all shared this, a crystal clear vision and the unshakable focus to follow it through. The truth is, the human mind was never designed to do everything at once. It was built to concentrate, to fix itself upon an aim and move relentlessly toward it. And yet, in our age of distraction, where the noise is constant and the demand for our attention never ceases, focus has become a rare and powerful currency. But here's the secret: the one who controls their focus controls their future. And let's take a step back. What is vision? It's not just a goal. It's not a New Year's resolution or a wish scribbled on a whiteboard. A true vision is a vivid mental picture of what could be, what should be, backed by the belief that it is possible. It is seeing something not yet real as if it were already real. And it's more than inspiration, it's direction. Vision gives you a North Star. It tells your mind what matters. It creates meaning out of chaos. But here's the danger. Without vision, your mind will focus on whatever is loudest, not what is most important. Without vision, you fall prey to the urgent instead of the essential. You become reactive instead of proactive. You drift. You get pulled into other people's agendas. And this is where the battle is lost. Not because you lack talent, not because you didn't work hard, but because you lacked direction. We were busy climbing, but the ladder was leaned against the wrong wall. Let's be precise here. Fear is not weakness. In fact, fear is evidence of potential. It only shows up when something matters. The moment you decide to stretch, to reach beyond the known, fear enters. That's the mind's way of protecting you, of pulling you back to safety. But understand this: safety and growth do not live on the same street. You cannot stay in the comfort of the familiar and expect to evolve. One must be chosen. So how do we transform fear into power? We begin with awareness. What exactly are you afraid of? Not the surface answer, but the real one. Fear often wears masks: procrastination, perfectionism, even cynicism. But underneath, there's always a more honest truth. Perhaps it's the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, the fear that you will not be enough if you try and fall short. The mind whispers, if I don't try, I can't fail. But that's the greatest lie of all, because not trying is failure. It is the silent surrender of your own potential. Once we name the fear, we must question it. Is this fear rooted in reality or memory? Is it built on experience or assumption? Most fear, if we're honest, is built on stories that were handed to us, not chosen by us. Perhaps you were told once that your dreams were too big, or that failure was shameful, but those were someone else's limitations, not yours. Why carry them? Then comes the transformation. You take the energy of fear, which is real, which is strong, and you redirect it. You use it. You say, if I'm afraid to speak, I must speak. If I'm afraid to act, I must act. Because the fear itself points to the very area where growth lives. It marks the border of who you are and who you could be. Fear is the doorway. Courage is the key. And here's the powerful truth. Fear and excitement are chemically identical in the body. The heart races, the palms sweat, the breath quickens. The only difference is interpretation. One says danger, the other says opportunity. Reframing is everything. What if instead of saying I'm afraid, you said I'm ready? What if instead of pulling back, you leaned in? Let me remind you. Every breakthrough you've ever had, every moment of true transformation was preceded by fear. Think about that. Fear shows up right before expansion. Not after, not during, but before. That's how you know you're on the edge of something real. That's how you know you're alive. It is in that moment, that very moment of hesitation, that you must decide, do I run or do I rise? And let us not forget, fear can be your teacher. It reveals what you value. You fear failing in front of others because you value reputation. You fear making the wrong decision because you value impact. These are not flaws, they are insights. But do not let your values be manipulated by your fear. Let your fear become a signal, not a stop sign. There is a kind of fear that comes from instinct, danger in the wild, a threat to life. That kind of fear is protective. But the other kind, the one we're speaking of here, is not about survival. It's about ego. It's about identity. And that fear, if not examined, will shrink your world down to the size of your doubts. But if used wisely, It can enlarge your world. It can become a fire that forges strength. When you act in the presence of fear, you build self-respect. You say to yourself, I do hard things. I move despite discomfort. I lead myself. And over time, that becomes your identity. Not someone who is fearless, but someone who is powerful in spite of fear. That's the kind of strength that builds unshakable confidence, not arrogance, not bravado, but the quiet certainty that you will not be ruled by emotion, that you will not forfeit your future to comfort, that you will meet the edge again and again, and each time you will choose to grow. So I leave you with this. Fear will always walk beside you, but it does not have to lead you. Let it be your signal, not your master. Let it sharpen your focus, not steal your voice. Let it remind you that you are on the brink of something worth pursuing. Because in the end, the ones who rise are not the ones who feel no fear. They are the ones who feel it and rise anyway. As we draw near the heart of this exploration into mental power, there is one final pillar we must bring into focus: persistence. And not just persistence as a vague encouragement to keep going, but as a disciplined, deliberate force that bridges vision and reality, because even the strongest mindset, the clearest goals, and the most inspired plans will collapse without the engine of consistency driving them forward. Persistence is the great equalizer. Talent may give you a head start. Opportunity may open the first door. But only persistence will carry you through the valleys that inevitably come. It is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is the daily repetition of intention, the silent act of choosing again and again what you said you would do, long after the feeling in which you said it has faded. Now here's what most people misunderstand. Persistence is not blind stubbornness. It is not banging your head against a wall out of pride. True persistence is intelligent. It adjusts, it adapts, but it does not quit. There is a difference between pivoting your method and abandoning your purpose. And if your purpose is true, if your vision is rooted in clarity, then persistence becomes a sacred responsibility. We live in a world obsessed with immediacy, instant results, overnight success, but that is a myth. Every success you admire, every monument, every innovation, every legacy, it was not built in a moment. It was built in obscurity. It was built in silence. It was built through relentless repetition when no one was watching, when the world had moved on, when the mind tempted you to stop. That is where strength is forged, not in the beginning and not at the end, but in the middle. And here lies the paradox of mental mastery. The breakthroughs come when you keep showing up after you've stopped believing they'll come. It is in that space, when the emotional high has worn off, when the applause is gone, when the feedback is silence, that your character is shaped. And let me be clear, character is not just morality. It is your capacity to endure, to repeat, to finish. That is the foundation of greatness. But persistence alone is not enough. It must be paired with consistency. You can be persistent in spurts and still fall short. But when you combine persistence with rhythm, when your actions align day after day with your values, momentum is created. Momentum turns ordinary habits into extraordinary power. And it is this quiet compound power that separates the wishful from the unstoppable. So how do we cultivate it? First, you must decide what matters enough to be consistent with. You cannot be consistent in everything. Life demands trade-offs. The mind has limits, so clarity is key. Choose your priorities with intention. Choose a handful of disciplines that directly support your purpose, and then make them non-negotiable. Then, build systems. Not just motivation. Systems, motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. But systems are structural. They guide you when your feelings falter. If you want to write, create a time and space to write every day. If you want to grow, schedule study into your calendar. Don't leave it to chance. What gets scheduled gets done. What gets done repeatedly becomes who you are.